Moving right along, we're going to bring up our first speaker for the afternoon session. Hailing from Razer USA, co-founder, CEO, and creative director. Please help me in giving a warm Lion City welcome to Min-Liang, everybody, doing a keynote. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for coming by. It's a real pleasure to be over here. And pretty much today, I will be talking about how hardware is the new software. And I might have a little bit of a biased view about this, but essentially, I hail from Razer. I don't know if everyone's familiar with us here. How many gamers are there over here? Okay, it's a tough crowd. Well, at least I know a couple of you guys will know who we are. So, co-founder and CEO of the company. We've been around since about 2005, and I'll chat a little bit more about the company in a little while. If you want to send me messages or write something rude to me, there's my Twitter handle, and that's my Facebook page over there. So, without much further ado, really quickly, let's first talk about software. And software is wonderful. I love software. Essentially today, you could pretty much have two developers with a credit card go, get a cloud service from Amazon. You could get an Android phone or an iOS phone, get onto a mobile app platform, and boom, you could reach millions and millions of users. And pretty much that's what has been fueling the entire boom of software companies for the past couple of years. The largest tech startups of the past couple of years have been software-based, and unfortunately, guys like me, we didn't get the memo and we worked on something else. But essentially, there have been a couple of reasons for how software has actually done that. Low capital expenditure. You don't need massive teams. You don't need massive infrastructure. Nor do you need, for that matter, tools or specialists in every aspect of developing a product. Two guys, with lots of ramen can really get you pretty far. Open source software, services, and APIs. And this is kind of stuff that has been out there for the past couple of years. Software used to be hard. It used to be really hard to do software. But over the past couple of years, things have changed entirely. Open source software, services, APIs available to pretty much anyone who's got a computer and a connection to the internet. Cloud services, as I mentioned, AWS, whether it's Azure, and mobile app stores, reaching to millions and millions of users out there. Now, bear in mind, of course, there's a lot of noise. You'll be jostling for attention with, a whole bunch of other app developers, but primarily, that's the real nature of the software. Low barriers of entry, but everyone gets a decent shot at getting the app out there or getting the software out there. And it's got extremely, extremely high margins. It's incredible. Margins of which have led VCs all over the world to say, wow, we want to put all, so look at this, scalable, extremely scalable, incredibly high margins. That's what's kind of driving the whole software boom for the past couple of years. But if you want to interact with the bits, you still have to go through the atoms. And, for the benefit of everyone, it pretty much means that to get to the software, for the time being at least, you still have to go through hardware. And that's what the main focus of the talk is about. Hardware. Really quickly, it's something that gets people really passionate. People get really, really excited about hardware. It's, there are two tech companies in the world that people tattoo their logos on. One of them is Apple and the other one's us. We really focus on bringing something truly special, I think, to the users out there, to the extent where people go, wow, I really like what you do, I really like what you bring, and I get incredibly passionate or crazy about. That is the beauty of hardware. However, there's a reason why we call hardware hardware, because hardware is really, really hard, to develop for. And why is that the case? It's got an incredibly long development time. Super long. You're talking about a product right from the moment where you do a startup for. You might take anything from about 24 months to 3 years to bring to fruition or to go to mass production. And that's just to what we call FCS, first customer ship. You've got to be mindful of all these acronyms like BOM costs, cost of goods. You've got to be mindful of stuff like PVT, DVT, acronyms which I would not wish on my worst enemy, candidly. And you're talking about really large specialist teams. It's not having common libraries that every developer would be familiar with. You've got to have mechanical engineers, electronic engineers. You've got to have materials engineers. You've got to have mechanical engineers that specialize in hinges. You've got to have thermals engineers. You've got to have wireless engineers. You've got to have wireless engineers that specialize in antennas, and the list goes on. You're talking about a massive, massive specialist team. It sounds like I'm trying to make sure that nobody gets into my space. But it's an incredibly large endeavor to really get a product from a concept all the way to ID, to a prototype, to a tool, so on and so forth. And it's incredibly difficult to iterate. It's not something of which you're going to say, look, I've got a great software idea, I'm going to come up with it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to change everything and do something else entirely different. Hardware is a different beast altogether. You're talking about an idea, a concept. You pretty much have one shot at it to do something great. And for most companies, there is a point of time where they say, we got to go to tool. The tool bit is pretty much an investment of a couple of $100,000. It could be a couple of $1 million. But any changes that happen over there are really minuscule. And that's one of the challenges with hardware. It's incredibly difficult to iterate at this point of time. And you've got to deal with animals like manufacturing, inventory. You've got to go on to the factory floor. You've got to go quibble, yell, go down to component costs, and really drive everything all the way down. And there's this thing called supply chain management. After you've come up with a great idea, you've made it, you've got to find a way to ship it from point A to point B. Personal story, for the first year of Razer, I had absolutely no clue what supply chain management was about. In fact, candidly, I think I know nothing still. But for the first year, we were shipping everything by air. Sounds logical. It sounded logical to me back then that, hey, if I want to get from point A to point B, it doesn't make any sense for me to go by sea. I would want to go by air. So every single one of our mice or products was going out at $5 a piece, from point A to point B. Going by sea would be 50 cents. But then, if you've got to go by sea, it's going to be on the sea for 30 days. If it goes by air, it can go by 3 or 4 days to the distribution centers, things like that. And all of this is just a small facet of trying to get a product from point A to point B. Then you've got something else. When you've got it from point A to point B, you've got to have the distribution channel management. And we're talking about traditional channels, we're talking about new channels, we're talking about direct channels. Channels, for example, which would be like if you're in North America, you want to go to buy a product at Best Buy. If you're in Europe, you want to look at Media Market Saturn. How do you reach some of these guys? And if it's online, you could deal with people like Amazon, Newegg, etc. Distribution channel management. All of this. And on top of all of this, all of these really difficult things to do, you've still got to do the damn software too. You've got firmware, at the same time, you've got the drivers, you've got the applications. All of this pretty much goes into a piece of hardware today. So hardware is incredibly hard. But to paraphrase Bob Dylan, they are changing. And hardware is a little less hard right now. Some things are still very difficult. Some things are changing. And what has changed, essentially? Contract manufacturing. Now, this has pretty much been a bit of a vicious cycle of sorts. Back in the day, the traditional hardware guys, the old school people like Dell or HP said, wow, it's getting harder and harder to make money. We're going to outsource all of this. We're going to create these contract manufacturers where we're going to get them to do the really low-end kind of stuff, get them to go build out all the factories and deal with all these manufacturing cycles, etc. They created contract manufacturers. Many of you could be familiar with some of these guys, whether it's Foxconn, Quanta, Inventec, so on and so forth. But these contract manufacturers, in a bid to find new business, because they deal with some of the real big boys, are today really open in terms of working with hardware startups. And many of these really large contract manufacturers have actually been behind some of the new startups that you might be familiar with. Multifunction SoCs. All the code, all the complexity, packaged and put into a single component that today engineers can just put together as a system. It sounds a little easier than it is, but it's incredibly, it's a lot easier today than it was yesterday. And you've got new age supply chain providers that take it takes all the complexity out of getting a product from point A to point B. And that's really, really helped. All of that, at this point of time, for a fee, of course. But they'll do everything from pick, pack, package. They can design the packaging for you, which is also a pain, by the way, if you're in a hardware startup. I'd say work on a package as soon as you start having an idea. But they do all of that for you. And you've got new distribution channels. What kind of distribution channels are we talking about? Some of the hardware startups have gone straight direct to the end user. You've got things like Kickstarter, for example, which is also, access to early stage capital. And what some of the most successful Kickstarters in early days are hardware startups. Why? Because hardware is truly very exciting. So all of that have been driven to a whole new slew of new startups of sorts. But this entire seismic change of sorts has been driven by some of the large tech companies and some of the largest tech companies today. Back in the day, everyone was pretty much, whether it was Microsoft or everyone looking at Apple saying, wow, I'd hate to be in their business. They've got to handle all the inventory, they've got to handle all the manufacturing. We've got some of the best companies out there doing just pure software. Apple kind of led a bit of a seismic change of sorts with iTunes, the iPod, an incredible connection between OS X and the hardware itself. And they pretty much pushed the entire industry to really realize that to get to the bits in an incredible way, you will have to get the atoms right. And Apple has done that incredibly well. Google, they just bought Nest. They've been doing hardware. They've got a huge hardware team. That's no secret. Hyper-focused on building some of the best hardware on the planet. Got Amazon. Traditionally pure web services, now doing everything in terms of the Kindle Fire, the Kindle TV, the Fire TV, so on and so forth. And one of the stalwarts of tech software, Microsoft. Past couple of years, they've been talking about how they will be pivoting or changing themselves to a devices and services company. Devices and services, hardware and software. So in short, in the past 24 months or so, hardware has been disrupting software. Software is still incredibly great. Software is still incredibly scalable, but essentially it's been disrupting software in ways that have not been done before. For example, we're looking at purpose-built machines with software smarts. Really great machines that today are built specifically with a view to get software all the way down to the user. We're looking at hardware that is upgraded with software. And then let me give you an example. Back in the day when we were working on a hardware platform, we had a vision to have all our devices call back to the cloud. And what we did was we prepared the EE for this, the electronic engineering all the way back. We got the PCB layout, we got all that sorted out. We rolled out hardware years before we could get the software features working. But once we had millions of these devices out there, we flipped the switch and we started releasing all these whole slew of new software, which left all the traditional hardware guys behind. We were able to upgrade firmware in the field. We were able to provide all kinds of new features, unlock them for hardware that users had said, I'm great with version 1.0. But now we were delivering things like 2.0, 3.0, all kinds of incredible new features just for the users. So hardware can be upgraded in the field with software. And today you're also looking at a new trend where sometimes hardware is sold without margin. And that's pretty freaking incredible. You're talking about app developers or companies that view themselves as software developers saying, I need to make great hardware. I need to make sure that my hardware wraps around the software so it gets into the hands of people. And the beauty of it is that it's incredibly difficult to get somebody to pay for software, but everyone expects to pay for hardware. So these are just some of the really interesting business models that have come about. And it's kind of brought about a rise of what I like to call the hardware 2.0 companies. And what are these hardware 2.0 companies? You're talking about companies that have been around a little bit, and these are a bit more ahead of the rest of the new hardware startups today. Definitely not in the traditional hardware perspective where it's just selling a box. You're talking about companies that see things in an entirely different light, that see hardware in an entirely different light. Who are we talking about? Guys like, say, GoPro. Many of you will be familiar with the action cameras that they do, but are they just a camera company? They're out there selling hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, valued in the billions of dollars at the same time, and they're doing things from a media perspective. You'll see them doing all kinds of media work. You'll see videos on YouTube. They've got a huge YouTube video channel. Hardware 2.0, been around for a while, but they've really reinvented how people look and use cameras. Jawbone, for that matter. Companies like Jawbone have been really focused in terms of the healthcare sector. They do hardware, they do great design, and they also bring an entirely different level of experience to the users out there. And of course, there are guys like us, hyper-focused in terms of the gaming industry, and I thought I'd just talk a little bit about this and share a little bit about our kind of perspectives for the past couple of years. So what do we do? For those who might be a little uninitiated, we ship everything from mice to headphones to laptops to, and upcoming, we've got a wearable coming up, which we just won Best of CES with. Products for gamers, by gamers, that's what our motto is. And we've shipped about over 13 million devices, smart devices, not just all devices, but smart devices. Devices that connect back to the cloud, devices that provide an incredibly great experience to the users. Now, what is probably not evident, because everyone's really hyper-focused on the hardware itself, is that we ship a variety of software to provide an integral experience, an end-to-end experience to the user. And that's what pretty much most of the hardware 2.0 companies are doing right now. There is a specific differentiation from just shipping pure boxes. And what do? We've got a cloud-based settings system. We've got a game launcher that aggregates all the games and puts it on a single platform. We've got a cross-platform communications channels that gamers will use for VoIP for League of Legends. They can call from their phone to their Android phone, from their PC to their Android phone to tell their friends, look, I'm going to join the raid in a bit. And we've got everything from surround sound systems. Now, all of this on a single sign-on software platform that most people don't look at because they are really hyper-focused on the hardware. And what do we have? We have got one of the world's largest software platforms out there, all of which is connected from a cloud all the way to a product in the field. We understand our users, we can help design much better product. A hit game would get maybe about 600,000 or 700,000 daily active users. Today on our platform alone, we've got over 1.5 million daily active users, but we don't look at monetizing this. We look at providing the users with a great experience. But this software platform is incredibly difficult to build. To have a great hardware company is incredibly difficult to build. A great software platform company is incredibly difficult to build. But to build a hardware and software company, a hybrid of sorts, is insanely difficult. But every single hardware 2.0 company today differentiates itself because hardware is viewed as conduit of sorts to provide that great experience out there. So, in closing, pretty much with what's happening in the world right now, software is still incredibly exciting. It's a wonderful, wonderful prospect for all of us. But hardware, given how things have been trending with contract manufacturing, with the know-how going out there in the field, with multi-function SoCs, I trust that many of you guys will be starting new hardware startups in the near future. and I'm certainly looking forward to it, because I certainly believe that hardware is the new software. Thank you very much. Thank you.